Good morning, everybody. That's a real honor for me to be here and to talk about efficacy testing. I'm representing Arxada, and you may wonder what Arxada really is. Arxada is a global manufacturer and supplier of active substances for disinfectants, so there is a pretty big chance if you are using disinfectant, our active substance is inside. Personally, I'm bringing almost 18 years experience in infection prevention. And today, I'm really more than happy to talk with you about efficacy testing, what is really needed, what are the latest developments in terms of efficacy testing, in terms of standardization. But what is even more important, how to identify misleading claims and what to really expect, what sort of questions you should really ask when you are looking for a disinfectant. So basically, quick intro and history of the standardization. Everything really began in 1961 when European Committee for Standardization was, let's say, founded, really it was really to create a reason to found this committee was to create standards across a lot of applications. And in early 80s, first standards for disinfection was already developed, so for chemical disinfectants, to ensure really good quality and somehow to ease make a good decisions about the healthcare disinfectants. But what is even more important is 1990, where harmonization started. And all national standards, which was developed before, was really harmonized into European standards. But why harmonization is so important? Obviously, there is a lot of things which making harmonization and normalization, standardization important. However, personally for me, safety and compliance, consistency and reliability, and benchmarking. Because right now, having European standards, you can really, first of all, you are pretty sure that product you are using was developed for a purpose. But what is most important, you can relatively easily compare apples to apples. You can compare products, and you can really be sure that when one product is claiming, let's say, bactericidal efficacy, second one, if claiming based on the same standards, was tested exactly in the same way. So you can really compare results, and those results should be really reliable. But what was before? What was before harmonization? What was before standardization? Well, that's a very good question, and basically, in majority of cases, everybody was relying on in-house methods. So company-specific standards with a limited validation, which pretty often was preferable for some particular chemistries. Obviously, there were some national standards like VAH, DGHM in Germany, which was great, but was again difficult to compare against standards developed in-house or other methods. And last but not least, very basic tests like MICs or MBCs, which didn't really take into account in-use conditions, so soiling, application way, etc., etc. So we can conclude that really in the past, before harmonization, before standardization, products were not comparable at all and could therefore lead to inadequate disinfection and at the end spreading of healthcare-associated infections. But what should you really expect in terms of healthcare? So it is very clearly described in EN 14885, and I will elaborate about EN 14885 itself in a minute. However, for the healthcare, you should really expect standards and efficacy proven based on the healthcare standards. And what does it really mean? It means that chemical disinfectants and antisepsis to be used in areas and situations where disinfection or antisepsis is medically indicated. So it doesn't mean hospital only. And this is exactly how it is written in the standard. So as you can see, hospitals, but also other medical facilities, dental institutions, medical laboratories for analysis or for research, among others, obviously. And in such case, what sort of standards for which applications we already have in place for healthcare? As you can see, Pretty lot, and I would say majority of standards for healthcare applications are developed right now. So we have a standard for hygienic hand rub, hygienic hand wash separately, surgical hand wash and hand rub separately, instrument disinfection, manual instrument disinfection by immersion, surface disinfection without mechanical action, and separate one for surface disinfection with mechanical action. So basically wiping, mopping versus spraying without any wiping later on. And recently standards for textile disinfection, so for laundry, obviously in healthcare applications was developed, and also for a water treatment for control of Legionella. Obviously, because I'm very limited with the time, I'm not able to cover all of them, but I will be around today and tomorrow, so I'm happy to talk with you if you wish more in depth. However, I want to show you some examples and explain you some principles. I already mentioned about EN 14885, which is sometimes called mother standard or overarching standard for chemical disinfectants. In this standard, we have methods described for different fields of application. So human medicine, which is obviously the one which we are looking after, but in this standard you will also find standards for other applications like veterinary area, so basically animal husbandry, or food, industrial, domestic, and institutional areas. EN 14885 is also covering standards which allow us to determine bactericidal efficacy, yesticidal efficacy, fungicidal efficacy, virucidal efficacy, mycobactericidal efficacy, and last but not least, sporicidal efficacy. But to add complexity to all those things, in the standardization you have so-called tiered approach. So on the one hand, you have very basic phase 1 tests, which are suspension tests, and those tests currently shouldn't be used to determine efficacy of a disinfectant. Phase 1 tests are very basic tests and should be used really to, on the very early R&D work to determine efficacy, potential efficacy of active substance, but not to really determine efficacy of disinfectant and to build claims based on this. So what is really mandatory to determine efficacy of a disinfectant? Product which you are most likely using in your facilities. Phase 2 step 1 tests, so-called suspension tests, and in combination with phase 2 step 1 test, phase 2 step 2 tests, which are carrier tests, quantitative carrier tests, somehow under simulated in-use conditions. Currently, phase 3 tests, so real field tests under practical conditions, are not considered to be developed. So we need to rely on those two phase 2 step 1 tests, suspension test, and phase 2 step 2 carrier tests. And just to give you an example, because as I said, I'm not able to cover all applications, but I just want to emphasize that requirements between applications are not the same, and you really need to be sure that a product which you are willing to use, you are willing to choose for your facility, is really claiming efficacy for application you are looking for. And here you have a comparison of, let's say, most common situations, so hard surface disinfection, and here we are comparing disinfection with mechanical action, so ready-to-use wipes or wipes prepared at the point of use, for instance, against disinfection without mechanical action, so basically you are spraying surface and you are leaving product on the surface without any action later on. So as you can see, quite a lot of standards is already developed here. Majority of them are still phase 2 step 1 tests, so suspension tests. However, there is already quite a few carrier tests which are really highlighted in red. So for instance, to determine bactericidal, and by the way, for disinfectant use in healthcare space, bactericidal and yesticidal efficacy is mandatory. It cannot be less than this. So if product is bactericidal only, it's not really suitable for healthcare applications. That's also how this is described in the standard. But going back to this comparison, you have bactericidal and yesticidal efficacy, for instance. So as you can see, suspension tests, so EN 13727 and 13624, is the same for disinfectants with mechanical action, so for wipes, for instance, and the same for products without mechanical action, so for instance, ready-to-use spray. However, here also important remark, in case of wipes, pre-impregnated wipes, for instance, good practice is when you are running such a suspension test to use liquid which is squeezed out from the wipe. That's a sort of remark. So, but as you can see, suspension tests are the same for mechanical and non-mechanical action. However, carrier tests are different. For wipes, for instance, so products disinfection with a mechanical action, you need to claim bactericidal and yesticidal efficacy based on so-called four-field test, so EN 16615, which is really somehow simulating real use condition because you are really wiping surface, you are really wiping carrier with a wipe. And that's how you are determining this efficacy. Whereas in case of products without mechanical action, you have recently developed standard for the healthcare applications, so EN 17387. In such case, you are basically spraying surface and you are leaving this without any action. Why this is very important? Because mechanical action can improve efficacy. So in other words, if you are evaluating, for instance, pre-impregnated wipes, you need to expect efficacy bactericidal yesticidal tested according to EN 16615 together with EN 13727 and 13624. And you cannot accept, or you shouldn't accept, for instance, wipes with 17387. All, let's say, other suspension tests are the same, and again, we are coming to the difference in case of sporicidal. That's also sporicidal efficacy, and I will elaborate about sporicidal efficacy itself on the next slide. However, just to give you a heads up. First of all, there is a new standard, new suspension test recently developed and published for healthcare to determine sporicidal efficacy, which is EN 17126. And as you can see, this standard is the same in case of products with mechanical action and without mechanical action. However, difference is in case of claiming efficacy against C. diff spores only, because here for products with mechanical action you already have carrier tests. So we are calling this sporicidal four-field test, which is whereas similar carrier test for products without mechanical action is not available. So again, if, for instance, you are evaluating ready-to-use spray, which is claimed to be used without any mechanical action, it will be really misleading to claim efficacy based on EN 17846. But in terms of sporicidal standards itself, in the past, due to the fact that nothing else was available, sporicidal efficacy for healthcare products was claimed based on industrial standard, 13704, which shouldn't be the case anymore because proper healthcare standard is already available since 2019, if I'm not mistaken. And I've made here a short comparison between those two standards. And I think it's somehow self-explanatory why EN 13704 shouldn't be acceptable anymore. Please have a look on the log of reduction first. For the industrial standard, only three log reduction is required, whereas in case of healthcare standard, 17126, 4 log reduction is required. That's a massive difference in the efficacy. Second of all, soiling, which is also pretty important. In case of industrial standard, interfering substance is only albumin, only proteins. Whereas in case of healthcare standard, when we are considering high organic load, so-called dirty conditions, you have a mix of protein with blood. So it's also trying to reflect real use conditions. And last but not least, mandatory test organisms. In case of industrial standard, very limited set, only Bacillus subtilis spores, whereas in case of healthcare standard, again, here, authors of the standard trying to reflect what is really an issue in the healthcare setting. So you can claim here sporicidal activity or efficacy, or product, disinfectant can claim sporicidal efficacy. And in such case, efficacy, so for log reduction against Bacillus subtilis and Bacillus cereus need to be proven, or sporicidal efficacy against C. diff only can be claimed. In such case, you need to achieve for log reduction against C. diff spores. So you can ask, okay, if I have efficacy against Bacillus subtilis and Bacillus cereus, does it mean that product will be effective also against C. diff? Not necessarily. That's the reason why we have this tier approach, and C. diff was taken into account as a separate test organism. And here, I just want to take you quickly through some misleading slides. Please accept my apologies for the fact that some of the screenshots are not in English, but I simply took the examples of products across the Europe, yeah? But let's say that's not so important. I just want to show you this product. Those are ready-to-use wipes, which are claiming to be bactericidal, yeasticidal, and tuberculocidal. And what they are claiming. On the one hand, they are claiming efficacy based on DGHM methodology. Again, hard to compare against other products. Obviously, they are also claiming some efficacy based on EN standards, but as you can see, only suspension tests. So EN 13727, 13624, which is not enough because EN 16615, again, I want to remind we are talking about wipes, so product with a mechanical action. Since 2017, EN 16615 is mandatory, so that's what should be expected as well. I already mentioned about DGHM claims. What else we can see here? Here they are claiming virucidal efficacy against enveloped viruses according to RKI, Robert Koch Institute methodology. Again, hard to compare against other products because EN 14476 is the right standard to claim efficacy against viruses. So, just to summarize, based on current claim set, such product is properly tested, or let's say what is available on this marketing material on the label. Only tuberculocidal efficacy is properly tested. So product shouldn't be really claimed as a bactericidal and yeasticidal product. Next example, also wipes, and here we can see quite a lot of claims against bacteria, which is great. However, again, only based on suspension test. So again, for field test 16615 is missing. Similar situation in case of yeast. Here we have claim based on 13624, which is suspension test, but based on wrong species, because Candida auris is not mandatory test organism. We should have claim here based on Candida albicans, which is mandatory test organism. We have Candida albicans based on 16615. So that's fine. However, 10 second. 10 second is again not in line with the standard because technically it's not possible to run this test within 10 seconds. 1 minute is mandatory contact time for this standard. So basically, you should expect that at least 1 minute is needed. Then we have mycobactericidal claim, which is great based on suspension test, which is great with wipe eluate, great, but again, not based on the mandatory test strain. Mycobacterium bovis is not the right one. Mycobacterium terra and Mycobacterium avium are the mandatory strains here. And last but not least, efficacy against viruses. So we are missing, we are non-enveloped viruses. That's a bit misleading claim because we are missing polio. Obviously, EN 14476 is giving possibility to make tiered approach claim. But again, this one is a bit misleading because you can claim virucidal efficacy against envelope viruses, limited virucidal efficacy, or virucidal efficacy. In case of virucidal efficacy, you need to have polio as a mandatory test organism. And again, bacterial spores, grade 1, 7, 1 to 6, but one mandatory strain is missing. Bacillus cereus is missing. And what I would like to emphasize here, no contact times. No contact times. So it's really hard to say how long it will take for this product to be active. It is also not allowed to make a claim, or you should be really careful, and you should really investigate products very, very carefully if you are seeing claim product effective from 1 minute. Again, we are running workshop tomorrow, 10 past 12. So if you want to learn more about efficacy testing, because I'm getting signs that I'm running out of time, I really want to invite you for those workshops. As I said, I'm also available over the next 2 days. But here I want to show you how proper claim set should look like. Yeah, for a wipes. That's the proper claim set for a wipes. Again, if you are really interested in this topic, please join us tomorrow for our workshop.